And we're breaking down the Niners' unofficial depth chart, which came out today from the Niners football communication staff. The headline item, Brock Purdy's QB1, we know that, but Trey Lance or Sam Darnold listed next on the quarterback list. Matt Barrows talked about just how close the Lance-Darnold matchup is.
It's close between, you asked me who's winning that number 2 quarterback competition. I'll give you a different name from practice to practice because, one day one guy will look good and the other guy will struggle. And I think in recent ones, early in camp, I thought Sam Darnold got out of the gate really well, looked better than all 4 of the quarterbacks. But he's come back down to earth a little bit. And I think with every practice, Trey Lance, while not perfect, looks a little bit more steady, which is what you were expecting or you were hoping if you were the 49ers you were getting from Trey Lance. So the longer camp has gone on, I think the more Trey Lance has started to stand out.
Matt Barrows from The Athletic this morning on the Morning Roast with Bonte and Joe Shasky. How does that make you feel, Alan, a guy who's been a supporter of Trey Lance and in favor of him getting a chance? Matt Barrows saying that the competition for QB2 is actually quite close.
I've thought about this before, Dibs, so I'm curious where you're at on this. And when you look around the league, there are certain teams that decide, I feel that they decide we want our backup QB to be a version of what the starting QB is, right? So the first one that comes top of mind would be Baltimore, Lamar Jackson, Tyler Huntley. So thinking about that and thinking about the Niners situation, it does make me wonder, we talked a little bit about this before, it does make me wonder, does it make sense to go from somebody like a Brock Purdy to Trey Lance as your 1-2 because it feels like they're much different players, right? And if the offense is used to performing a certain way or just, going about things a certain way, it would feel to me that going from Brock Purdy to Sam Darnold would be easier. But that also doesn't mean that Sam Darnold is playing better than Trey Lance. So I'm excited for Trey Lance, and I want him to be number 2. It's just a bit of a sidebar that I think about in terms of going from one quarterback to a completely different quarterback. Maybe coaches don't care about that, right?
In terms of the styles,
yeah, exactly.
Pun intended, between the starter and the backup, wanting them to match up in terms of how they play. One thing is clear, and this is from Kyle Shanahan in the post-practice audio, Brock Purdy will not be on the field this weekend.
I doubt Brock plays. Fully decided it yet. I mean, usually when we go scrimmage against guys, I rarely play our starters. That's usually my plan going to it because a little more into the practices and the games. I've changed my mind a couple times too based off how those practices go. So usually that's our plan, but we'll see how those practices go.
Additionally, he talked about whether or not Brock should play at all in the preseason.
Brock need to play at all in the preseason.
I mean, I think it's always good to play. I mean, you don't think he has to. I don't think a lot of guys don't have to, but it usually helps.
Shanahan sounds some fresh Shanny right there. He doesn't have to play. Certainly it helps, although he doesn't expect him to play this weekend. What do you think about that in terms of what we were talking about, the Trey Lance, Sam Darnold battle? Does this help Trey Lance potentially get a leg up on Sam Darnold, knowing that he's going to get more chances in Vegas?
Well, I think it does, but it's what you do with those chances, right? And I'm more so thinking about how we've seen a couple quarterbacks, established quarterbacks in the past, come out sluggish from not playing in the preseason. So I would be surprised if we don't see Brock Purdy at all, because you don't want the first game to be Brock's preseason game. You can't have that. So I'd be very surprised if he doesn't play at all, and I expect to see him play. And I think I think him not playing that much is also good for Trey Lance because, and I don't know if it's a mental thing or anything like that,
right?
But early on, it did feel like reports were saying that Trey Lance was playing better on the days where Brock wasn't out there. And look, that's probably much ado about nothing. But there could be something to that. So, hey, Trey, don't worry. And maybe it even helps, to be honest, Dibs, that Kyle Shanahan is just being open about it. There's no more. We all knew, or most people knew that it was going to be Brock just because what he did during the regular season.
Right.
But now that you have Kyle Shanahan just saying he's a real deal, that's our guy, now Trey can just change his goal and focus on a new goal. And as probably tough as it is for him, now he knows what to focus on, and maybe that takes some pressure off of him. Is there any way I can overtake and get back to QB1? No, not right now.
Exactly.
So just focus on making sure you're QB2 and go from there.
Some clarity, and it definitely gives him some closure in terms of, can I be QB1? I think that that's a good point, but also going into the preseason now with the first game Sunday in Vegas against the Raiders, now Trey Lance knows, for the most part, and you heard Kyle Shanahan, the sound I just played, about he doesn't expect Brock to play. He hasn't totally closed the door on that, but that would give Trey Lance certainly a big opportunity, and Sam Darnold a big opportunity, and then Brandon Allen, whatever scraps are left in terms of the actual practice game snaps against the Las Vegas Raiders. But Trey Lance can know that he might be QB1 for Sunday, and then 6 days later, you've got the Broncos back here in Santa Clara for preseason game number 2. We don't know if Brock will play in that game. I'm hearing from Kyle Shanahan a sense that Brock Purdy, even if he plays in the preseason, it won't be a lot.
One series, right? And then, as I just said, you got to get him in there. Then it becomes, well, what is the point of that, right? Did that really help? Just playing one series, so
cobwebs, shake off some of the rust a little bit.
Sure. I guess one is better than nothing, but it's still real football, even though it's not a real game.
Yeah.
So yeah, very curious to see how that goes down. Trey Lance, Sam Darnold, when they get on this field and they're in these preseason games, Dibs, all I want is for people to keep the same energy. I don't necessarily care what your take is in terms of if you care about preseason stats or not, but if you can find it in your heart, I'm talking to everybody now, obviously, not just you.
Preach.
To not just run with whatever narratives fit your guy, that would just be much appreciated for the rest of Niner fans.
So in other words,
how I
if
feel.
you're going to talk about Trey Lance going 5 of 11 with a pick in practice, make sure you also report that Sam Darnold goes 6 of 13 with the pick on another day.
Yes, and I
Keep
would
that
say
same energy.
Keep the same energy. That's all I'm asking. If Trey Lance balls out in one preseason game, and hey, if you're a quote unquote Trey guy and Trey Lance balls out in one preseason game, oh wow, he can do some things, and then the next game he sticks up the joint, just admit it. Don't go back now and say, well, it's preseason, because last week Trey was ready to take over the world. And I would say the same with Sam Darnold. So it's just a small ask that I have. I know most fans or a lot of fans aren't able to do it, but that's all I ask. Just keep the same energy regardless.
Yeah.
That's it.
It's the old Rodney Dangerfield line, I think, from Caddyshack. Keep it fair. Keep it fair.
Exactly.
You just want to have it be kept fair. One thing we do know, Nick Bosa will not be out on the field in Vegas. I'm not even sure if he took the flight with the team. I would imagine he probably stayed back to work out. Matt Barrows on the morning roast this morning talked about why the 49ers are actually pleased with giving Nick Bosa a massive deal.
Bosa, you feel confident about because he's been so steady, and not just steady, but steadily ascending. He manages to somehow carve a little bit off of his fat content every year, and he gets a little bit quicker because of that. So, that's what gives them the confidence to really kind of give him this big contract. And they've known forever that this contract was coming. That's why I don't think it's really on their side why it's being held up.
Yeah, it's certainly not a surprise that you've gotten to this point. And, oh, wow, look at that. Nick Bosa needs a new deal. Wow, who could have seen that coming? So I don't think that the holdup is over will they or won't they. It's just a question of how they can structure the money.
Yeah, and another note, Dibs, Nick Bosa coming in at number 4 on the NFL Top 100. That's pretty good last time I checked.
Yeah, really good. And Trent Williams down at like 14, I think.
Yeah.
The Niners did have a good handful of players inside that top 20 or the top 25, which is impressive. But much like any of these lists, whether it's quarterback tiers or the
I
top
love it, though.
100. I know I love it too.
Yeah.
And it's content.